The retirement advice you've been following your whole life is the exact thing that could leave you unprepared, and almost nobody will tell you that. Most retirement advice is obsessed with one number: how much you've saved. Financial surveys keep asking people the same question: what would you do differently? And the answer almost never comes back as, "I wish I'd saved more." It comes back as something closer to, "I wish I'd bought certain things sooner while I still could." Save enough, and people assume the rest takes care of itself. It doesn't. What you buy, and when you buy it, turns out to matter almost as much as how much sits in the account. Let me tell you about a man who spent 31 years at the same company before he finally retired. He had a decent pension, a paid-off house, and a savings number his financial advisor told him was more than fine. By every measure that shows up on a spreadsheet, he did everything right. Then, 6 months into retirement, his car broke down for the third time that year, and he found out he could no longer easily qualify for a new auto loan on a fixed income. A year later, a knee that had been bothering him for a decade finally needed surgery, except now he was paying out of pocket for a specialist his old insurance used to cover. And the fishing trip he'd been talking about since his 30s still hasn't happened, because every time he looks at booking it, some part of his brain says, "Not yet, better to be safe." He wasn't broke. He wasn't careless with money. He just never learned the difference between saving enough and buying the right things at the right time. Nobody warned him that some purchases quietly get harder, more expensive, or completely off the table the moment that final paycheck stops. That's the part of retirement planning almost nobody talks about. Everyone obsesses over the number in the account: how much you need, how fast it's growing, whether you're on track. Almost nobody talks about timing. The specific window, usually your last several working years, when certain purchases are cheaper, easier to qualify for, or only possible at all because you still have a paycheck and your current health. So, in this video, we're breaking down 7 of those purchases. Not luxury items, not bucket list splurges for their own sake. Practical things that are meaningfully harder, more expensive, or completely off the table once you actually retire. No complicated formula. Just 7 decisions worth making while the window is still open. This isn't a list for men with unlimited money. It's for regular, hard-working guys who want to retire without running into the same walls he did. And the good news is, every single item on this list is something you can start acting on this year, no matter how close or far your retirement date actually is. Let's get into it, starting with the one men put off the longest and regret the most. Number 1, life insurance. Bought while you're still insurable. The first thing worth locking in before you retire is life insurance. Some people think of it as something only young parents need, a policy to cover a mortgage, protect little kids, and then forget about it as the years go by. But here's the part that catches people off guard. Life insurance is priced almost entirely on age and health. Wait until your late 50s or 60s to shop for a policy, or wait until after you've retired, and your premium can double, triple, or simply become unavailable if a health condition has shown up in the meantime. High blood pressure, diabetes, a heart scare, even something as ordinary as sleep apnea. Imagine 2 people the same age, both wanting the same coverage. One buys a policy at 45 while they're healthy and still earning. The other waits until 58 after a minor health scare convinces them it's finally time to get serious. The first person locks in a low rate for decades. The second person pays dramatically more if they can get approved at all. This isn't a purchase that feels urgent. Nobody brags about their life insurance policy, but it's one of the rare financial decisions where waiting has a specific, measurable price attached to it. And once your health changes or your age moves the price out of reach, you don't get that window back. If you already have a policy through your employer, remember it usually disappears the moment you leave that job. A lot of people don't realize this until they're already retired and suddenly uninsured. If coverage matters to your family, look into a personal policy that stays with you regardless of who you work for, and lock it in while the price is still on your side. Number 2, a long-term care plan. Decided, not ignored. The second thing is the one almost nobody wants to think about, which is exactly why it deserves your attention now. Long-term care means the cost of a nursing facility, assisted living, or an in-home caregiver, if a day comes when you can't fully take care of yourself. And the uncomfortable truth is that most people will need some version of this eventually. In many areas, a private room in a care facility runs well over $100,000 a year. Long-term care insurance is priced the same way life insurance is, based on your age and health. Buy in your 50s, and it's manageable. Wait until your late 60s, or wait until after a health event, and you may pay drastically more or not qualify at all. You don't have to buy a policy. Some people choose instead to set aside dedicated savings to self-insure against this cost. Either path works. What doesn't work is avoiding the decision entirely, because the families who never plan for this are the ones who end up scrambling, draining retirement accounts overnight, or making rushed decisions during one of the hardest moments of their lives. I've talked to families who went through exactly this. A parent needed care, nobody had a plan, and adult children ended up pulling from their own savings or taking on debt to cover a cost that could have been addressed decades earlier. It's one of the most preventable financial crises a family faces, and one of the least discussed, simply because nobody enjoys imagining a future version of themselves who needs help with everyday tasks. Number 3, the health and dental work you keep postponing. You probably saw this one coming, and for good reason. It's one of the most common regrets retirees bring up. While you're working, you likely have employer-sponsored insurance with solid coverage, including dental and vision. Retire before 65, and you may be paying for private insurance out of pocket, often with a smaller network and a higher price tag. And here's something a lot of people don't realize even after they're on Medicare. Standard Medicare does not cover dental or vision care unless you buy a separate supplemental plan. So if there's a crown, a root canal, new glasses, or a knee that's been bothering you for years, your working years are the cheapest and easiest time to deal with it. Getting these things handled while your insurance is strongest, and while you have the working years left to recover comfortably, can save you real money and real pain later. Think of it like maintenance on a car before a long road trip. You don't wait until you're halfway down the highway to check the brakes. This also applies to preventive care you might be skipping simply because life is busy. A full physical, updated blood work, a proper hearing check. Catching a problem early, while you have strong coverage and access to specialists, is almost always cheaper and easier than catching it late. Number 4, a home that actually fits the retirement you want. Notice this isn't just a home. It's a home that fits the life you're actually planning to live. Plenty of people bought their house in their 30s without thinking 30 years ahead. Then retirement arrives, and suddenly there's a yard too big to maintain, stairs becoming a real problem for aging knees, or a location too far from family, doctors, or community. If downsizing, relocating, or moving closer to grandkids is even a possibility in your future, the years before you retire are the easiest time to make that move. Lenders want steady income and employment history. Once the paycheck stops, qualifying for a mortgage gets much harder, no matter how much sits in your retirement accounts. You don't need to rush a decision. But if moving is on the table at all, start researching now, get pre-approved while you're still employed, and give yourself real options instead of being boxed in later. Even if you're not sure yet whether you'll move, it's worth having a real conversation with a lender about what you'd qualify for today versus what you might qualify for on a fixed retirement income. That single conversation can turn a vague, maybe someday, into an actual, informed decision, made while you still have leverage. Number 5, the home repairs that are coming whether you plan for them or not. If you're staying in your current home through retirement, this next one matters just as much as moving would for someone else. The aging roof, the HVAC system on its last leg, outdated plumbing, windows leaking heat and cooling out of your house all year. These expenses feel optional right up until the day they're not, and they have a habit of showing up right after your last paycheck. There's also a quieter category worth mentioning: aging in-place upgrades. A walk-in shower instead of a high-sided tub, better lighting, wider doorways, a bedroom and bathroom on the main floor. Nobody wants to think about needing these things, but installing them now as a simple renovation is far easier than installing them later out of necessity in a rush after a fall. Handling these repairs while steady income is still coming in means you won't be pulling large lump sums from your retirement savings at the worst possible moment, like right when the market happens to be down. There's also a peace of mind factor that's easy to underestimate. A home with a newer roof, working systems, and no looming repair bills lets you actually relax in retirement instead of mentally cataloging everything that could break next. That kind of quiet security is worth planning for just as much as any dollar amount in a savings account. Number 6, the skills and hobbies that will fill your time. Here's one people rarely think of as a financial decision: investing in what comes after your career ends. Maybe it's woodworking tools. Maybe it's a certification that lets you consult a few hours a week. Maybe it's finally learning the instrument you always wanted to play. Whatever it is, buying into it now, while you're still in learning mode from your career, sets you up for a much smoother transition later. A lot of retirees go through an identity shift that catches them off guard. For decades, a big part of who they are is tied to their job. When that disappears overnight, it leaves a real gap. People who've already built a hobby, a skill, or a plan for their time tend to adjust to retirement far more smoothly than people who simply stop working with nothing lined up to fill the space. Treat this as a legitimate retirement expense, not a frivolous one. It's an investment in the thousands of hours of free time you're about to gain. Ask yourself a simple question. On a random Tuesday afternoon, 3 years into retirement, what will you actually be doing? If the honest answer is, I'm not sure, that's worth addressing now, while you still have coworkers, structure, and a paycheck to build the next chapter around, instead of figuring it out from scratch the week after your last day of work. Number 7, the bucket list trip you keep pushing back. And finally, the one that ties everything else together. Book the trip or experience you've been dreaming about. Here's the trap that catches so many people. While working, you tell yourself, I'll do that once I retire, when I finally have the time. Then you retire, the paycheck stops, and your brain shifts into an entirely different mode. You start living off savings instead of earning new income. And even people with plenty of money often feel an irrational fear of spending. That trip keeps getting pushed back year after year, until one day your health or mobility makes it harder to do the things you once dreamed about. If there's a trip, a reunion, or an experience that genuinely matters to you, book part of it, or set the money aside before you retire. Planning it while you're still in an earning mindset makes it far more likely you'll actually follow through instead of endlessly postponing it in the name of caution. This doesn't mean throwing your budget out the window. It means being intentional, deciding in advance what truly matters, planning for it like any other expense, and giving yourself permission to enjoy the life you worked so hard to build. You spent decades trading time for money. Retirement is one of the few stages of life where you finally get to trade some of that money back for time and for experiences you can't buy back later once your health or energy changes. Don't let fear of spending quietly steal that trade from you. Your action plan. If you're a few years from retirement and wondering where to start, don't try to handle all 7 of these at once. That's where people get overwhelmed and end up doing nothing. Take it one step at a time. 1. Look into life insurance now, while your age and health still work in your favor. 2. Make a real decision about long-term care, a policy, or dedicated savings, instead of avoiding the topic. 3. Schedule the health and dental work you've been putting off while your coverage is strongest. 4. If a move is in your future, start the process while your income can still qualify you for a mortgage. 5. Handle major home repairs and aging-in-place upgrades before they become emergencies. 6. Invest in a skill or hobby that will give your retirement years structure and purpose. 7. Book the one experience that matters most to you before hesitation talks you out of it. None of this requires you to be wealthy. It requires you to shift your thinking a few years earlier than most people do. Retirement planning isn't only about how much you've saved. It's about making sure that money actually gets used to build the life you want at the time in your life when it can do the most good. If you're watching this and realizing you haven't handled any of these 7 things yet, you're not behind. Most people haven't either. The difference between the people who retire feeling prepared and the people who spend their first year of retirement full of regret usually comes down to one thing: they decided to start planning early. Not next year. Not eventually. Now. You don't need to fix everything this month. You only need one next step. Get a life insurance quote. Schedule that dental appointment. Have a long-term care conversation. Book that first flight. Small decisions, made early, add up to a retirement you actually get to enjoy instead of one you spend catching up on. And if you're not sure where your finances actually stand right now, that's okay too. That's exactly where step one starts for almost everyone. You don't need a perfect plan today. You need an honest look at where you are and a direction you're willing to move in. Your retirement story hasn't been written yet. The next chapter starts with the decision you make today. The best time to prepare for retirement was years ago. The second best time is before you clock out for the last time.